the phenomenon of alien abductions is one of the most fascinating and at the same time most controversial topics of our time. These stories, which often border on science fiction, have deeply penetrated mass culture, giving rise to numerous books, films, and television shows. At the same time, attitudes towards claims of abduction range from sincere belief to categorical denial. Many consider this phenomenon to be a figment of the imagination, a dream, or even a deliberate hoax, while others are convinced of its reality, citing their own experiences and the testimonies of others as evidence. Reports of such cases come from all over the world, but are most often recorded in English-speaking countries, especially in the United States. This geographical concentration may indicate a certain cultural influence on how people interpret and report unusual events. Perhaps this is due to greater attention to the topic of UFOs and aliens in local media, the presence of established cultural narratives, or simply greater openness to discussing such sensitive issues. The purpose of this article is to explore the phenomenon of alien abductions, relying on real testimonies, factual information, and the opinions of experts from various fields. The history of research in the field of alien abductions includes several landmark cases that have significantly shaped public opinion and subsequent stories about similar events. The abduction of Betty and Barney Hill, 1961, USA. This case, which occurred in September 1961, is considered the first widely publicized case of alleged alien abduction in the United States. Betty and Barney Hill, returning from vacation, noticed a strange light in the sky that seemed to be following them. After returning home, they found that they could not recall about 2 hours of their journey. Subsequently, with the help of hypnosis, they told a story about how they were taken aboard a metallic disc by gray beings with large eyes. On board, they allegedly underwent medical examinations, including the taking of samples of hair, nails, skin, as well as a crude pregnancy test for Betty using a large needle. Betty also claimed to have seen a star map on the ship, which she later drew under hypnosis. The investigation of the incident, conducted by the U.S. Air Force as part of Project Blue Book, found no confirmation of the abduction, suggesting that the light seen by the Hills could have been the planet Jupiter. However, it was the detailed account of the Hills, especially the description of the gray beings in the medical examination, that became a kind of template for many subsequent claims of abduction, which may indicate a certain influence of their story on later witnesses. The case of Antonio Villas-Boas, 1957, Brazil. This incident, which occurred even earlier, in 1957, in Brazil, involving farmer Antonio Villas-Boas, received less publicity, but is also one of the first documented cases of alleged alien abduction. Villas-Boas claimed that while working in the field at night, he was abducted aboard an egg-shaped flying object. There, he allegedly underwent a physical examination, and also had sexual contact with a female alien. After the incident, Villas-Boas reported various physical symptoms. This case initiated the theme of interspecies interaction and possible physical consequences, which is also found in later abduction stories. The sexual element in Villas-Boas's story, although not as common as the description of gray beings in the Hill case, demonstrates the diversity of early claims and the possible influence of cultural myths, such as legends of succubi. The Travis Walton Incident, 1975, USA. In November 1975, logger Travis Walton allegedly disappeared for 5 days after encountering a UFO in the forest, witnessed by 6 of his colleagues. After returning, Walton claimed that he had been aboard a spaceship. This case caused significant controversy, including skepticism from some ufologists and ambiguous results of lie detector tests taken by Walton. The Walton case is important due to the presence of several witnesses, which complicates the analysis of abduction claims. Although Walton's colleagues passed lie detector tests, according to some sources, the results of his own test and the possible motive of avoiding a fine for not completing work on time raise questions about the truthfulness of his story. The Linda Napolitano case, 1989, USA. In 1989, New York resident Linda Napolitano claimed that she was abducted by aliens from her own bedroom in Manhattan using a tractor beam. A feature of this case is that, according to her, 23 people witnessed the abduction, including the then UN Secretary General Javier Pérez de Cuellar. Researcher Bud Hopkins supported her claim, presenting testimonies from these people who allegedly saw Napolitano flying over the Brooklyn Bridge. However, doubts later arose regarding the reliability of these testimonies. The independence of the witnesses was questioned, and parallels were also found between Napolitano's story and the 1989 science fiction novel Night Eyes. In addition, Napolitano claimed that she was harassed by two men who allegedly witnessed the abduction, and also spoke of a strange object found in her nose by X-ray, which disappeared before surgery to remove it. The Napolitano case, despite the large number of alleged witnesses, illustrates the difficulties in verifying abduction claims and the possibility of external influences or misinterpretations. The fact that one witness reported seeing something on a foggy morning that did not actually occur, and another did not close her curtains out of fear, suggests potential biases or unreliability of observations. Parallels with the science fiction novel also raised doubts about the originality of her story. Analysis of numerous reports from people who claim to have been abducted by aliens reveals a number of recurring themes. One of the most common is capture, often described as sudden paralysis, sometimes accompanied by a bright blue light or a feeling of unknown energy. Many report being allegedly transported through walls or windows onto an unknown aircraft. Various examinations are often conducted on board, which many describe as invasive medical procedures, especially focused on the reproductive system. There are reports of sperm and egg retrieval, as well as other biological fluids. Communication with the abductors is often mentioned, which can occur telepathically or in the form of warnings about environmental problems and the threat of nuclear weapons. Many mention loss of time, not remembering what happened during a certain period. Return is often described as sudden, sometimes in a different place than the abduction site, or with marks on the body or disheveled clothing. Despite the presence of common themes, abduction stories also contain significant variations. Different types of aliens are described. Most often the so-called Greys are mentioned, but also reptilians and Nordic aliens. The motives for abductions also vary, from scientific research to interspecies breeding. The emotional impact of these experiences on people who claim to have been abducted is often profound and traumatic. They describe feelings of fear, helplessness, and incomprehension. The consistency of certain themes and stories coming from different parts of the world from people who seemingly are not connected to each other is often cited by proponents of the abduction theory as evidence of the reality of this phenomenon. However, it should be noted that these common elements, such as the image of greys, medical examinations, and loss of time, may also be the result of cultural influence through mass media and the spread of certain narratives within the ufological community. At the same time, variations in the stories may reflect individual interpretations, cultural origins, or the influence of different researchers and their methodologies, which may unintentionally shape the memories of witnesses. The cultural environment in which a person lives can influence the content of their abduction story, indicating the role of cultural frameworks in shaping these experiences. Whitley Strieber's book Communion, published in 1987, became one of the most influential works popularizing the phenomenon of alien abduction. In his book, Strieber describes a series of allegedly real encounters with unknown beings, whom he calls visitors, avoiding a definitive identification of them as aliens. Strieber explores various possibilities regarding their nature, including extraterrestrial origin, but not limited to it. His detailed and emotional description of night visits and medical examinations aboard an unknown ship significantly influenced public imagination and spawned numerous imitations in literature and cinema. His story features some tropes characteristic of abduction claims, such as anal probing and the association of owl sightings with hidden memories of encounters with visitors. However, Strieber's claims have provoked considerable skepticism and debate. One of the arguments of skeptics is that before the publication of Communion, Strieber was a well-known horror writer, which casts doubt on the reliability of his autobiographical account. The Strieber case vividly illustrates the blurred line between personal experience, belief, and potentially artistic elements within the phenomenon of abduction. The fact that Strieber was a horror writer indeed raises questions about the possible influence of his creative past on his abduction story. The use of hypnosis and recovered memories, as in other cases, also introduces the possibility of confabulation. From a scientific point of view, there are a number of psychological explanations for claims of alien abduction that do not involve actual interaction with extraterrestrial civilizations. One of the most common explanations is sleep paralysis. This phenomenon occurs during the transition between sleep and wakefulness, when consciousness has already awakened, but the body's muscles still remain paralyzed, as during the rapid eye movement (REM) phase of sleep. Sleep paralysis is often accompanied by a feeling of the presence of a stranger, fear, and vivid hallucinations, both visual and auditory. The symptoms of sleep paralysis, such as the feeling of immobility, the presence of someone else, and hallucinations, are extremely similar to common elements in abduction stories. The feeling of being paralyzed and seeing strange figures during sleep paralysis can very well be misinterpreted as alien abduction, especially by people already inclined to believe in such phenomena. Another important factor is false memory syndrome. Hypnosis, often used to recover memories of abduction, can lead to the creation of vivid but inaccurate memories, especially if leading questions are asked during the session. Reliance on hypnotic regression in many abduction cases raises concerns about the reliability of recovered memories. It is known that hypnosis increases susceptibility to suggestion, and leading questions from researchers can unintentionally shape or create memories of abduction experiences. Suggestibility and a tendency towards fantasy also play a role. People with a developed imagination and a tendency to immerse themselves deeply in fantasies may be more likely to interpret unusual experiences as alien abductions. Individuals who report abductions often show higher scores on scales of susceptibility to fantasy and absorption. A rich imagination can prompt people to expand or misinterpret dreams, hallucinations, or other unusual experiences as real encounters with aliens. In addition, there is a potential link between psychological trauma, existing beliefs in the paranormal, and the interpretation of events as alien abductions. Some studies indicate a correlation between reports of past abuse and abduction experiences, although this issue remains a subject of discussion. For individuals who have experienced trauma, an abduction story may serve as a way to process or make sense of a difficult or incomprehensible experience. Also, a previous fascination with New Age concepts and paranormal phenomena is often observed among those who claim to have been abducted. People already open to the idea of extraterrestrial life and paranormal phenomena may be more inclined to interpret ambiguous experiences in this context. Expert opinions on the phenomenon of alien abduction vary significantly. Some researchers, such as Bud Hopkins, David M. Jacobs, and the late Johnny Mack, took claims of abduction seriously, citing the consistency and emotional sincerity of the stories as an argument. They often emphasized the detailed nature of the narratives and the reported physical consequences in abductees as evidence of the reality of these experiences. Johnny Mack, in particular, believed that these experiences were literally physical in some aspects, as well as psychological or spiritual, emphasizing the complexity of this phenomenon for believers. Some proponents of this point of view believe that aliens have specific motives for abduction, such as studying human consciousness or creating hybrid offspring. The recurring theme of reproductive procedures in abduction reports is a key element in these proposed motivations. On the other hand, skeptics, such as psychologists Richard McNally and Susan Clancy, explain claims of abduction by psychological factors such as sleep paralysis, false memories, and suggestibility. They often point to the lack of verified physical evidence and the similarity between abduction stories and known psychological phenomena. The argument that the age of camera phones increases the burden of proof for abduction claims suggests that the absence of clear photographic or video evidence is a significant problem for believers. Studies comparing people who claim abduction with control groups often found no significant differences in psychopathology, but noted higher levels of suggestibility, tendency to fantasize, and absorption among those who claim to have been abducted. This suggests that psychological characteristics may play a role in how people interpret and remember unusual experiences. The review of Johnny Mack's work at Harvard University, although allowing him to retain his position, indicated a loss of trust among colleagues. This underscores the controversy and lack of generally accepted scientific recognition of the literal interpretation of claims of alien abduction. Claims of alien abduction do not come only from the United States. A well-known example is the Meng Xiaogui incident in China. In 1994, farmer Meng Xiaogui claimed to have met a 3-meter-tall female alien with 12 fingers and braided hair on her legs. He claimed to have had intimate contact with her and received a prediction about the birth of their common child in 60 years. Lie detector tests and hypnosis were also conducted in this case, the results of which were ambiguous. The Meng Xiaogui case shows that abduction claims are not limited to Western cultures, although specific details and interpretations may differ. The cultural context of these claims, including existing beliefs about extraterrestrial life and the interpretation of unusual phenomena, likely plays an important role in shaping the narratives. Mass media, including science fiction literature, cinema, and television, play a significant role in shaping public opinion and imagination related to alien abductions. The image of the gray alien with large eyes, which is now widely known, likely originated or was significantly popularized by early abduction cases, such as the Hill case, and subsequent depictions in the media. The consistency in descriptions of alien beings in various stories may be partly explained by the pervasive influence of these media portrayals. An entire subculture has formed around the topic of alien abductions, with support groups and a detailed mythology. This subculture provides a certain framework for interpreting personal experiences and reinforces belief in the reality of abductions. The phenomenon of alien abduction remains a complex and multifaceted topic. On the one hand, there are numerous personal testimonies that often contain striking details and emotional persuasiveness. On the other hand, the lack of convincing physical evidence and the presence of psychological explanations call for skeptical analysis. It is important to maintain a balanced perspective, respecting individual experiences, but at the same time applying critical thinking and a scientific approach. Although the question of whether alien abductions are real in the literal sense remains open, the phenomenon itself offers valuable insights into human psychology, belief systems, and the power of narrative.